I'm Grant Threlkeld, and this is my EDL 854, Module 16, Case Study, Missing Booster Club Funds. As a summary, George Washington Middle School is a middle school with declining enrollment. Mr. Daniel Stevens is the principal. Athletic events are frequently worked by parent volunteers of the Booster Club. They usually have 2 parents who work the gate and 2 that work concessions. Mrs. Bowman is one of these volunteers. She has a daughter, Lucy, who is an accomplished cheerleader and has asked that PTA funds be used to cover the cost of her daughter to march with other all-state cheerleaders in New York. This request was denied by Mr. Stevens, citing the needs of all students to have the funds used to benefit all students. After a busy basketball game, the funds were counted and all seemed to be well. Mr. Stevens was busy with other supervisory duties. A patron saw Mr. Stevens at the game and mentioned to him that he had paid for the gate admission with a $50 bill. However, there was not one in the ticket sale bag. Mrs. Bowman worked the gate. There seemed to be a cloud of suspicion on what happened to the $50 bill. What do I know? George Washington Middle School is a middle school with a declining population. Mr. Daniel Stevens is a well-liked principal and works well with parent organizations. Booster Club volunteers work the events at games, 2 at the gates and 2 at the concessions. There is not an assistant principal to help with extra duty assignments. Mrs. Bowman volunteers and has a daughter who attends the school. They have also had 2 other children who have attended this school. Lucy, Mrs. Bowman's daughter, is an accomplished cheerleader who has been invited to march in a parade in New York. Her mom asked Mr. Stevens to have PTA for the trip. Mr. Stevens refused, citing the needs of all students when it comes to spending funds. Mrs. Bowman asked Mr. Stevens to reconsider. After a conversation at the basketball game, Mr. Dumas saw Mr. Stevens and mentioned paying with a $50 bill. Mrs. Bowman was working the gate that night. At the end of the night, when Mr. Stevens was counting the funds, which were verified by a security guard, there was no $50 bill. There was a note from Mrs. Bowman saying that 10 tickets had been torn and therefore canceled out. If these tickets were excluded, then the books balanced. However, the 10 missing tickets were not found. They were not left in a place that Mr. Stevens could find them. What do I need to know? I need to know what are the board policies on how to investigate situations like this. What are the board policies in handling of funds? And is it possible to have paid workers working the games that are more under the jurisdiction of the school? Can the Bowmans afford the trip to New York without the PTA funds, or would this be the only way that Lucy could attend? Was there another person working the gate, and did the other person working the gate see the torn tickets? What happened to the tickets? Were the 2 gate workers working together, one in charge of the tickets and the other one with the money, or would it be 2 gate workers on manning different gates? Were there any other large bills? Could the $50 bill have been used for change for another larger bill? And has this happened before? What is the problem? There may be $50 missing, with the possibility of using damaged tickets as a cover for the missing funds. There may be a problem with policies in place that it can allow for suspicion in cases similar to this one, as money, from what I read, wasn't counted until Mr. Stevens counted it and balanced the books at the end of the night. And there are missing tickets. We don't know what happened to the canceled out tickets, and there's only Mrs. Bowman's note identifying what happened to them. For a proposed action plan, the first thing that I'd like to do is talk to the superintendent, verify policies, and let that person know what's happening or what has happened. Second, I'd want to look at all of the books and see if there's been money missing anywhere else or if there have been similar set of circumstances. Third, I'd want to talk to Mrs. Bowman and hear from her what happened to the tickets and where they were placed. There may be a very simple explanation for it. It may be more sinister, and that would help determine where I'd want to go in the future. However, I would be hesitant on making accusations for the possibility of that becoming slander and destroying the relationship, which up to this point in time, it sounds like, has been a very good patron for the school system. Fourth, I'd like to look into changing the gate sales and concessions are run, possibly looking to see if the district can hire people to do the work or extra duty pay for staff members. And at the very least, I'd want it to be a buddy system where there are two people who can verify everything. Fifth, I'd look at not having Mrs. Bowman be a person in charge of money. She could perhaps be a ticket person. She could be a runner at the concession stands, getting people the food that they purchase, but I wouldn't want her handling money directly. Sixth, I would start having the money people count and verify funds, initialing the total before taking it to the bank bag, and doing the same with the ticket people, so that way I can isolate if there is a problem where that problem is happening. Seventh, I'd want to evaluate and retrain all volunteers or new hires on policies and have them check off and sign off saying that they understand. So that way, if a policy is broken, we can refer back to that and then we can take on other plans of improvement. Eighth, I'd want to create reminder cards to be placed in locations such as the gate or the concession area on what policies are expected to be followed, or a checklist, so that way people know what is to happen. Ninth, if I were to discover that there was money missing, taking the appropriate measures depending upon if this was a mistake, an isolated theft, or a continuing problem, and going from there. And lastly, I'd want to talk to the district financial officer, superintendent, and possibly Mrs. Bowman about other means that the school can take to help Lucy take this trip to New York, if feasible. It sounds like Lucy has done something, and through the Mr. Stevens talking about it in the daily announcements, it's a point of pride for the school. So I'd want to be able to give the school and this community, although the school appears to not have the robust student growth that one would hope for, I want to give them a point of pride. Category 3, resolve the issue. By going back through and retraining with reminder cards on what procedures are, should eliminate the problem of having unaccounted tickets and how to handle large bills. By not having Mrs. Bowman directly work with the money can help alleviate the cloud of suspicion. And I would look at adding policies that would isolate each part of the money collecting and ticket taking process so that incidents like this do not happen again, where there's a cloud of suspicion, but it would more than likely be more difficult to pinpoint. Category 4, what am I thinking, feeling, and valuing? What am I thinking? I'm thinking that this is a problem and it has to be fixed immediately. I'm thinking that I have to be careful not to accuse anyone until I have more information. Yeah. Accusations without proof can only destroy a school community. And I'm thinking, where did the tickets go? That's one of my big concerns right now. Because knowing where the tickets are can help either identify that there's money missing or that less sinister means may have been taken. What am I feeling? I'm feeling sadness for Mr. Stevens that the safeguards did not hold. I'm feeling confusion as to what went wrong. And I'm feeling motivated to fix the problem and to find a guilty party if possible. What am I valuing? I'm valuing each student and the need for the money to be spent so that it has the greatest impact on all students. I'm valuing Mrs. Bowman's right not to be falsely accused before evidence is gathered. And I'm valuing the need for complete and thorough policies. What are the unresolved issues? We do not know if Mrs. Bowman perpetrated a crime. There's only a cloud of guilt. We do not know if there have been other issues with reconciliation at this school. It doesn't appear to be so, but the fact that when Mr. Dumas mentioned the $50 bill, that is what caused Mr. Stevens to be looking for it. But prior to that, we don't know if the situations like this had happened before. And we do not know if Lucy was able to go and if Mrs. Bowman continues to be involved in the school. Um, I would hate to see an active parent not to be active anymore, because then it just leads to questions of, well, why aren't you? Well, uh, Mrs. or Mr. Stevens wouldn't help pay for a trip, and some people might therefore not want to participate as much anymore because it's, well, what are these funds going to? How am I promoting effective and efficient management of school problems? Number one, I'm going to go back and fix the policies. By going back and reviewing the policies and finding out where there are potential holes and looking to fill them will only benefit the students. I'm also looking at training or retraining volunteers. By training everybody to do the job the exact same way every single time allows for uniformity and that people know how to handle situations when they present themselves. And I'm looking at trying to have paid workers so that way we have consistent people working every single gate, or a small group of people. Again, promoting that consistency, that uniformity, which can be held to the school standards. How am I promoting the social learning of every student? I'm modeling procedures and working to develop policies that are easily followed, models consistency, which can carry over to the school day. I'm promoting the school by talking about Lucy's accomplishments and talking to others in the district about seeing what we can do to help Lucy, can give Lucy and the school a sense of pride, something that can be bragged about. And by not rushing to judgment, I'm showing that I value uh, the ideals of innocent until proven guilty, that it would be easy to blame Mrs. Bowman and create a negative persona of a patron of the school. And how am I promoting the academic learning of all students? I'm not spending the PTA funds on one student. By not spending the money on one trip, which could deplete the funds and therefore resources for the entire district, I'm looking to see what can be done to help all students inside and outside of the classroom. I'm looking to create or fix an accountability system for all funds. And that in order to have funds spent on students, there must be an effective accountability system. If I were to brush this off as a one-time event, it essentially takes money out of the students' hands, which could go to something that could benefit them in the classroom. And I'm modeling effective problem-solving skills. In this particular scenario, there could be the possibility of rushing to judgment because of suspicion, but by taking the time to evaluate and look internally for ways to fix the problem prevents the perception that I'm only looking for a scapegoat and not looking for uh, how to fix the problem. Thanks for watching. I've enjoyed this class. It's been interesting and a challenge. Thanks.